Exciting news, we wrote our first book. People always ask us what book to start with and where to even begin with Irish mythology. That's not just Irish. Celtic mythology covers Scottish, Irish and Welsh, and it's beautifully illustrated. It's available online and it will spark your love affair with these tales. Audiobook coming soon. Conas, how are ye? Welcome back to the Candlelit Tales podcast, where we tell Irish myths set to original music. My name is Aaron and I'm one half of the storytelling duo that makes up Candlelit Tales, and in this episode we continue our series on the Fianna, aka our Fianna Saga. And today's podcast is the Pied Hag of the Mists, part 1 of a 2-part episode. This one's told by my sister Sorcha, and to listen back to our reflections and our chats and to support this podcast, you can join our Candlelit crew by following the links in the description below. But for now, here's Sorcha. Tell us a story, will you?
Now, over time, the young heroes of the Fianna, they took their place. They found their own niche, they found their own renown. There was Diarmid with his great beauty, and MacLugad, and the tale of him shaping up to be a fine young warrior became more important than any of his previous churlishness. There was Naoise, who settled into a rhythm, 1 year as a man and 1 year as a woman. And there was Fergus Fionn Vale, Fionn's son, who became the poet of the Fianna, calling out to them from the sidelines, encouraging the warriors when their courage started to fail them. And of course there was Oisin, Fionn's own darling son, a warrior and a poet, the light of his eyes. And it's not becoming for a father to have a favourite, but it was hard for Fionn not to show. Because Sive had been his best beloved, and Oisin was her son too. Now one day, when they were out hunting, a woman appeared on a white horse, with yellow hair braided down her back. And she called out to Oisin, and she said, "You've stolen my heart from afar, and I want you to come away with me to my Renown, to its sunny place, and live a life of ease and comfort with me." And Oisin was immediately enthralled, and went to her, and went away with her across the sea. And there she told him of the great oppression she was under. She'd been in love with the son of the High King of Ireland, Cardbre, but she'd put him aside, and he had not taken kindly to being put aside. And so Cardbre had assembled a band of Fomorian warriors to come after her, to get her back, to fight against her own will and capture her. And she felt that Oisin was a warrior that she could love, and also one who could protect her. And so Oisin fought for her. For Eivor of the yellow braided hair, he fought off the army of Fomorians that Cardbre brought against her. He won her freedom for herself. And then with that freedom, she chose to come back to Ireland with him. And in time, they had a child called Oscar. Now, Oscar grew up fast, having the blood of the other world on his father's side and his mother's. Oscar grew up straight-limbed and strong, and all of the Fianna doted on Oscar. Every one of them, young and old, they'd save their marrow bones for little Oscar. Caoilte would tell him stories, and even Gul MacMorna would dandle him on his knee. And they all made sure to let no hardship ever touch Oscar. Oscar was the delight to all of them. And of course, Oisin loved that his son was so loved. And Oisin dedicated himself evermore to being part of the Fianna, this great family that his father had built. Now one morning, the day dawned misty and dreary, and so some of the Fianna decided to go hunting with Fionn McCool in hopes that it would clear, and some stayed behind. And even Fionn's hunting hounds split on this day, with Bran coming with Fionn and Sciolán staying behind with Oscar. Diarmid decided to go on the hunt, and so did Oisin. Conan Whale decided to go, but Caillte and Gull MacMorna stayed behind, along with Nisha and Fergus Fionn Vale. And so split and so divided, part of the Fianna went out on their hunt and part of the Fianna stayed at home. Gull hosted a feast for them at Bin Adair, where he lived, in his great hall. And Fionn led the rest, the adventurous ones, the ones who weren't going to be put off by a bit of bad weather. He led them to Glen na Smole. Now they all knew that Glen na Smole could be a little bit close to the edge, a little bit on the precipice of the other world, so they kept their wits about them. But at the same time, there was no better place to find adventure. And not for the first time, and not for the last time, the Fianna scared up a deer. And it was a strange-looking deer. One half of it black, and the other half white, divided cleanly down the middle, as if there were two different creatures stuck together. The deer sprang up in front of them and sprang away, and every single one of the hounds of the Fianna took off after it, into the mist. And the Fianna gave chase. And at first, it was the delight of the hunt, as so many hunts had gone before. But very quickly, things turned. The Fianna could not hear their hounds anymore. They stopped and they cast about. And they looked for track or trace, and they could find none and nothing. And Diarmid turned to Fionn and asked him what had become of their hounds. And Fionn put his thumb between his teeth. And when he spoke, it was with a heavy heart. All of the hounds of the Fianna are lost. All of the hounds of the Fianna are dead, save only for Bran. None of them will return. Now, at that, the Fianna were devastated. Diarmid cried out, his favourite hounds he'd brought with him. He'd rather have 50 wounds all over his body than to lose his hounds. Conan Whale MacMorna berated Fionn for always leading them into danger and foolishness and adventures like this. And he swore that he'd have his vengeance on Fionn unless Fionn restored to him hounds, the same quality as the ones he'd lost, hiding his grief behind his bluster. And the rest of the Fianna, they hung their heads. They looked at one another. But none of them could think of what to do. And then they heard a piteous whimpering. And they saw Bran, the last surviving hound of the Fianna, tail between her legs, whimpering and whining. And she came up to Fionn shivering, covered in black bog water. Shaking, dripping, whimpering. Fionn put his hand on Bran's head, comforted the dog, and he was glad that Sciolán was left behind. And then, from out of the trees came a woman, a stranger to them. She called out to Fionn McCool. She said, "Fionn, my mistress has invited you to a feast." And Conan spoke up and said, "It's about time our luck turned. I wouldn't mind a feast. I'm hungry and tired and wet. The day hasn't cleared at all. It's mistier now than it ever was before." And the woman looked at him a little sidelong, and then looked back at Fionn, and then smiled very graciously and said, "And you can bring your companions. They're all welcome to my mistress's house." And she led them then. She led them by a way they could not have traced back, even the great hunters of the Fianna. She led them into a she-mound. The side opened up, and in they marched. Now Fionn had some knowledge of the other worlds, but he couldn't place where they were, what part of it they were in, which she this was and who it belonged to. It was someone strange to him. But the light started to dawn when he saw their hostess. She was a cailleach. She was a hag of a particularly strange appearance. One half of her body was white as snow, and the other half as black as ink. And she smiled at him through a lopsided mouth. And she said, Fionn McCool, be welcome. Come in with all your companions. Come in and be seated. Have a drink, take a load off, relax. And Fionn looked back at her and he said, do you know what happened to our hounds? For they set off chasing a creature that shares some resemblance to you. And the hag grinned again out of her lopsided mouth, and she said, they're all dead. All dead, everyone. And I brought you here, Fionn, because I've heard tell of your deeds, and I wanted to see if your beauty matched it, and it does. And so you will be my husband from now on. And when Fionn heard that, he choked on his drink, spat it out, and affronted looked at the woman and said, never. Not thinking. Horror spurred him to honesty. And as soon as he said that, the smile twisted to a scowl. The hag said, well, you'll listen to my music before you make up your mind. And before Fionn could react, before he could do anything, before any of the Fianna could stand or shout or move, she had pulled a little ornate harp from under her cloak, and she struck it. And the sound that flowed out was strange, discordant but hypnotic, lulling and jarring at the same time, and they all found that they could not move. And then the hag stood up, and she took a sword, dark on one side and light on the other, and she went along the ranks of the warriors of the Fianna, and one by one she struck them dead where they sat. Unable to move, Fionn watched her. Closer and closer she came to his own son, Oisin, and he cried out, your quarrel is with me. Leave my men alone. And she looked at him. Have you changed your mind? And Fionn was thinking fast now. He said, well, I've been living with Gull McMorna's daughter this past year, and if I put her aside, just like that, to take you as my wife, Gull will have a thing or two to say about it. So the hag looked at him and said, all right. Gull, is it? And she reversed the sword then, and she struck the warriors one by one with the other side, and one by one they breathed again and sat up, but still they could not move. There's a gesh on you, the hag told Fionn. You cannot leave this place. And with that, she stood and she walked out of the she. And Fionn and all of the warriors there, they looked at one another in horror. Some had died and been brought back. All had lost their beloved hunting hounds. None were able to stand or move. None were able to fight against this enchantment that she had put on them. And they all struggled as hard as they could, but to no avail, knowing that outside, somewhere, she was moving. She was moving against their friends, against their companions, against Gull McMorna, unsuspecting, from his house in Binadair. And Oisin thought too of his sweet son Oscar, who'd never known hardship in his life. And he thought of his darling wife, Eivor. and his brother Fergus Fionn all unsuspecting, all of them unready for what was coming their way.